This is mee siam, a Malay noodle dish that is savory, sour, sweet, and mildly spicy that is most commonly eaten as breakfast here in Singapore as well as in Malaysia. Fried vermicelli noodles with a sweet and sour tamarind gravy. This requires two separate cooking process but is really quite easy, trust me, so let's go. First, let's talk about the noodles. This is vermicelli or bihun noodles. These are thin rice noodles and will be sold dry like this. Before using, we will need to rehydrate this first. This is a pack of 400 grams and we really don't need this much. So let me try to pry these apart and I'll make a huge giant mass and place that in a bowl just like this. And then pour over hot water all over the noodles, and you want to make sure you have enough water to cover the noodles. And then we are leaving this alone to soften and rehydrate for just 15 minutes or so. 15 minutes later, the noodles should become all soft and pliable just like this, and you want to go ahead and drain away the water. So you don't want to over soak these, otherwise they will become too soft and mushy, which is not what we want. And our vermicelli noodles are now ready for use. Keep that to one side. Okay, next, the blended base paste. First, we'll need to prep the dried chilies. You can do all these while you're rehydrating the vermicelli noodles, by the way, efficiency. Give the dried chilies a quick wash and then pour hot water all over to rehydrate the dried chilies as well. You'll need to do this so it blends easier later on. And when you come back, the dried chilies should be all nice and rehydrated just like this. Drain the water away. You can give the dried chilies a nice quick rinse and then cut the dried chilies up. I like to go in with my scissors like this. You really don't want to be handling these dried chilies with your hands. It will sting, trust me, personal experience. Next, same thing with dried shrimps. You want to give the dried shrimps a quick rinse underwater and then pour the hot water all over the dried shrimps as well. This will help to soften it and again makes it easier for blending. Okay, let's actually get to the blending. To a blender, add the dried chilies earlier or a dried chili paste if you have that at the ready. Your standard onion, or you can use shallots as well. Some garlic. And finally, the soaked dried shrimps. You can toss the shrimpy water into the blender as well. That's all a flavor. You can also add a couple extra tablespoons of water if you need the blender to run a little more smoothly. Not too much though, because it will take longer to cook off the liquids later on. And then you want to go ahead and give all of that a nice good blender whirl, and you should be able to get something like this. This seems like a lot, but that's because we are going to be double diluting this paste. Split this into two equal portions. This is the most important ingredient for mee siam, tauco or salted soy beans. This is what it looks like, and this adds that distinct salty umami taste in the mee siam. So if you can't find this, you can easily replace this with Japanese miso paste. That would be the closest alternative. You can also use doubanjiang or Chinese bean sauce or a doenjang or Korean bean paste. Anyway, with the tauco, you want to give it a rough mash with a fork just like this. But I like to use a pestle for this because it just speeds up the mashing process. You just want a rough mash, so you still want some bigger chunks just like this. This is what my mom does, and it makes the dish look nicer later on when you can see some of the soybean chunks in it. And then you want to keep this to one side. This is another crucial ingredient in mee siam, tamarind. This adds that signature sour tang to mee siam. Now, Siam refers to the old name of Thailand, and this dish is named so because of the tang of the tamarind, the sourness. I'm using tamarind paste here, and this part is optional, but I like to just add some water to it and dilute it a little bit just so that I can mix it in easier with the gravy later on. Anyway, finally, let's get to cooking. We are going to be making the gravy first. To a pot, add some oil and over a low to medium heat. Once it is hot, add half of the blended paste that we made earlier. You want to keep the other portion for the vermicelli later on. Continuously stir the base paste over the low to medium heat until the paste reduces and turns into a deeper shade and the surrounding oil has turned red. This can take a while depending on how much liquid you added to the base paste. It can take about 5 to 10 minutes. Just be patient and slowly stir fry it. Once you have something like this, and it should be really fragrant at this point, add the mashed tau chio from earlier. Stir all of this in with the base paste. Let it combine and then add water to create a gravy. If you want to use stock, you can as well, but I'm someone who would always recommend stock to replace water in any recipe, but in this case, I much prefer using just water. I find that sometimes stock will tend to distract from the taste of the tamarind and the tau chio, and to me, mee siam is all about that tamarind, so I like to use just water to let that tamarind shine. Speaking of, add the tamarind next. And for some sweetness, I'm adding sugar. And this is dried tamarind slice, but this is completely optional. Usually I do not add this in, but this adds a nice extra sour layer to the dish. Cover the pot with a lid and we are letting the gravy come to a boil. This will take about 10 minutes or so. And when you come back, your gravy is almost done. Give your mee siam gravy a taste test before seasoning it finally with some salt. Don't forget that the tau chio has salt in it, so you don't actually need much salt for it. Don't be shy also to add more sugar or tamarind paste depending on how your gravy is tasting like. Anyway, give all of that a good final stir and your mee siam gravy is actually done. Next, we are frying the vermicelli mee siam noodles. To a pan, add some oil and once it is hot, add the other half of the spice-based paste. This is a super quick process, so you can do this while the mee siam gravy is cooking, by the way. Same thing, you want to stir fry this base paste until it deepens in color and the surrounding oil has turned red, and it should also be really fragrant. Once that happens, add some water to it and this is going to make stirring the noodles easier later on. Along with some salt and sugar to taste. Give that a stir to incorporate and once the liquid boils, add the soaked vermicelli from earlier. Stir the noodles through the sauce and evenly coat the vermicelli noodles. Now this is a task, okay, I'm not gonna lie, so be prepared to flex some muscles here to toss the noodles through evenly. For an easier time, you can actually cut the noodles shorter. You can also use 2 spatulas. Then I'm also adding some bean sprouts here and I'm going to be stirring that through as well. Once everything is nice and evenly coated and you should feel tired at this point, I know I was, turn off the heat and your noodles are ready for use. Okay, time to assemble our mee siam noodles. Add the fried mee siam to a bowl and then top the vermicelli with the mee siam gravy. Garnish it with some boiled eggs, boiled prawns, of course we need some of that chives, some more extra bean sprouts, as well as some cubed tau pok or tofu puffs. And finally, and probably most importantly, a calamansi lime, or you can also use a lime wedge. You can also use a lemon if you can't find limes. And right before eating this, make sure you give that lime a nice squeeze. I feel like I cannot have mee siam without that final spritz of fresh, zesty lime. And there you go. I want you to give this spicy, sweet, sour, ultra appetizing mee siam a quick go, and bye. If you like this noodle or recipe, you will love any of this as well.